Our backlog's over 40,000 cases right now. And that's crazy when you start thinking about it. And for officers, we keep seeing the same suspects go to jail over and over and over, and they're let right back out. And the sad part is, with this consent decree,
Officer Douglas Griffith is the president of the Houston Police Officers Union. The Houston Police Officers Union recently authored a report titled "A Random Review of a Week of Dockets of the 16 Misdemeanor Criminal County Courts of Harris County." Did I get the name of the report right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So in that report, I know that you guys summarized some interesting findings, and why don't we just to kick things off, can you tell us, maybe give us the key takeaways, the summary of what you guys found in that report?
What we wanted to look at is we have a consent decree that basically was entered into by some of the county officials for bail reform. And part of that was something that we obviously agree with. We don't believe that people should be locked up just because they're indigent. We have no issue with that. We're afraid that this consent decree that they entered into went a little far, because what it does is it basically doesn't hold anyone accountable for their actions, because there's no reason for them to come back to court. If it's a misdemeanor case, at most you're going to pay is a $100 fine, if that. For the most part, they're released on their own recognizance, just a promise to appear to come back to court. We started checking and finding out that a lot of these cases are being reset, and we weren't exactly sure why. So we did a little deeper dive into it, and what we found out is that only about 16% of the people that are ordered to come back to court actually show up. And instead of just doing a forfeiture of bond, because obviously they don't have one, they would just reset their case, send them a letter and tell them, hey, this is going to be your new court date, show up. Well, what happens? Again, they don't show up. And so this could go on forever like this, and our backlog continues to grow. Our backlog's over 40,000 cases right now. And that's crazy when you start thinking about it. And for officers, we keep seeing the same suspects go to jail over and over and over, and they're let right back out. And the sad part is, with this consent decree, it has bled over into the felony courts as well. And that has become a complete nightmare for us here in Harris County.
Interesting. So for those that don't know, you mentioned the consent decree. Can you give us a little bit of background? Like, when did this start with kind of the bail reform, and maybe a little bit of background on the lawsuit? I think it's O'Donnell versus Harris County, right?
Correct.
And when did the consent decree start? And for those, I've mentioned consent decrees on here a lot when I'm talking about training, because being an attorney, we don't want to litigate in the court. We don't want it to get to a lawsuit. So I talk about, we don't want to come to a settlement with a consent decree, and there's reasons why. And maybe you can tell us how this resulted in the bail reform that you're having down there right now.
Yes, this began with a young lady that got arrested, and it was a misdemeanor offense. She was placed in jail, and she was unable to get out to allegedly go to work, and so she didn't have the money to bond out. So they brought a lawsuit saying, hey, look, we need to be able to get a lower bail or no bail and allow these people to give an opportunity to come back to court without hindering their lifestyle, without them having to worry about missing work or anything like that. So instead of the lawsuit, Harris County entered into this O'Donnell agreement. And basically what it is, it allows them to get out of jail on little or no bonds. And again, 95% of the misdemeanor courts are PR bonds. So it's just your promise to come back to court. And in this random week that we studied this, we found that, again, only 16% were coming back. Now, one of the
other... 16%.
16%. Now,
yeah, that's low.
Yeah,
that's incredibly
real low. The monitor for this consent decree. Now, Harris County spent $97 million to implement this program. $97 million.
Wow.
That's a lot of money to implement this. And so what they did is they continued on, and their monitor is like, oh no, they're showing up, 80% are showing up. And we're like, how is that the case? So that's why we did this other study. Harris County DA's office did a study and said it was closer to 48 to 50% showing up. And our study showed 16%. Now, when you look at it, the reason they're claiming 80% is because they're not revoking any of these warrants. They're not putting out warrants for people that are not showing up. They're just resetting the case, sending them a letter saying, hey, this is your new court date.
I see. Yeah.
And then they want.
So it's not showing up.
Correct. And one of the other issues is the monitors like, oh, recidivism is down. Our recidivism rate is super low. Well, if you don't have a conviction on one side and it gets picked up for 14 more cases, to me, that's recidivism. Just they're not counting it because none of it's been adjudicated yet.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say what it reminds me of kind of something a law school professor told me in law school. He's like, there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics.
Yes, sir.
And it sounds like, I pulled, I couldn't find the monitor's report, but I did find the RFP that they put in for, and I noticed they estimated the cost, at least for the monitor, was going to be around $3.5 million for 7 years. That's another thing I stress of why you don't want a consent decree, because of, like you said, if $97 million is the cost of implementing the program, plus we're paying the monitors $3 million, then who has to, foot the bill for that? It's going to be the taxpayers. Okay. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
To kind of continue on here and maybe tell us like what you're seeing, sort of, how is this kind of affecting the law enforcement community down there in the current, shape and form that this is in?
Well, like I said, that's one aspect of it. The problem that we're really seeing is that it's bleeding over into our felony courts. So now if you get a felony in Harris County, you can get out on a $100 bond. And that in itself is a problem because you've got these guys that are stealing catalytic converters. That's a big thing here in Harris County now. We've also got these what we call sliders, juggers, the BMV suspects that break into your car and steal your stuff. All those are misdemeanor charges. So after the second or third one, they will bump it up to a felony. We've got robbery suspects out on $100 bonds. And what's even more concerning is when you look at the people out on multiple felony bonds, not just one, we have people up to 14 felony bonds. How do you sit there and say, okay, this is working, but once you're caught 14 times for felonies, that you're still given a bond? You've proven you're not going to be a productive member of society at that point, in my belief. But because they're not holding trials, they claim that COVID kept them from holding trials, so they didn't have trials for probably a year. Some courts did, some courts did not. It just depended upon the court. We have 174 people, citizens of Harris County, that have been murdered by someone out on multiple felony bonds. Now, we're not just talking one.
That's incredible.
Multiple.
Yeah.
We have, now let me ask you this, and you're an attorney. You understand the state of Texas capital murder. Kill more than one person in the commission of a felony offense or a police officer. Those three things that will get you a capital murder charge.
Yes. We
have 18 people currently in Harris County out on bond for capital murder.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'll tell you, you probably are aware of this. So here in New Mexico, where I'm at, we went through the bail reform. I want to say it was around 2016. And it's a lot of what you were saying when they first implemented it. It was a nightmare. And even the proponents of it all agreed, and we're still seeing it, that like it's like everybody, there's just nothing. We have people with multiple, cases. Catch and release kind of was the term being used, and we've seen over time the courts and the people that make the rules start kind of chipping away at it a little bit. But I'll tell you, in my conversations with my friends still at the DA's office, we still see a lot of that. But that's incredible to know that, because here in New Mexico, we always used to think like, well, let's just send them to Texas because it's going to be more serious over there. But it's remarkable to hear that you guys are running into the exact same problems that we did when it was first implemented here, and we still have a lot of it. There's still work to be done, and even the proponents of it will agree that there's still a lot of things to work out. You mentioned earlier, like the consent decree was designed to just apply to misdemeanors, right?
Correct.
But you're also seeing this now with felonies. Has it become like sort of the rule, or is it just like a pilot project, or just the judges are doing it?
It depends on the judge. In fact, we had 2 judges that come up, and we have a left-leaning DA, Kim Ogg. She's a Democrat, and she ran on some of this reform stuff. But now she's realizing it makes her office look bad when these judges aren't doing their job. So they have filed over 1,500 motions to the court to say, hey, we want a higher bond or a no bond for this individual. And they've been denied almost every single time. The judges are coming back going, oh, well, they have to request a hearing. Well, as an attorney, once they submit that paperwork saying they want a higher bond, that is the request for a hearing. They don't have to walk up there to the judge and go, hey, judge, we would like to have a hearing on this. They don't. They submit. It's all done through paperwork. We know this. It's always been done that way. But the judges are being very disingenuous when they speak with the public because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to get voted out.
Yeah. Right. I'm telling you, that sounds like you guys are having a lot of the same problems that we did when it first came in, because there was no system in place. It sounded great. Let's have bail reform. Let's get rid of cash bonds. Like you said in the beginning, I don't think there's anyone that disagrees that we should be holding someone in custody just because they can't pay a bond. But then what's the replacement for it? And then we run into these situations here where we got people charged with murder, and like you said, multiple cases pending that are out on bond. Let me ask you this: when I reviewed this and preparing for the episode tonight, I noticed the RFP that the monitors submitted on page 2. They said that they want this to be a blueprint for lasting change and a model for the nation. So, from your perspective and law enforcement's perspective, has it gone that way so far?
In Harris County, it's been an epic disaster for us. Again, one of the individuals that was let out on multiple felony bonds, he didn't show up. And so they put a warrant out for him. Our officers went to the house. 2 of our officers were shot. A sergeant was shot and injured, and we lost an officer, Bill Jeffries, to this individual. At that point, we started just clamoring about this judge and why he's allowing these people to get out. The problem in his court was worse than we ever knew. And we actually targeted him and 4 others who were continuously releasing people on low bonds. And each of these, we had one judge that allowed 10 different people out on bond, multiple felony bonds, that had murdered someone. You could keep body counts by the court. Luckily, we got all 4 of those beat in their own primary, because even the Democrats are starting to understand it's making their party look bad. So whether you're Republican or Democrat, to me, doesn't matter. Because
I agree.
A crook doesn't care. He's not going to come ask you, are you Republican or Democrat?
Right.
They're going to stick a gun in your face. They're going to rob you. And they're going to take your car and possibly shoot you. This should be a bipartisan issue. This should be a crime and safety issue that our public needs to be aware of and do what needs to be done to hold people accountable.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, here in New Mexico, when we first implemented it, it was this. There was a lot of confusion. The Supreme Court sort of made rules, and when I reviewed this, it looks like from the consent decree there was kind of a local rule that was initiated, and for the first couple of years, it was just trying to figure out I noticed there was a lot of apprehension with the judges. Also, they knew, because here it was a constitutional amendment, and it's misdemeanors, it's everything, and it was a sweeping change. There was a little bit of deception on how they got it to be a constitutional amendment. They basically put it on the ballot saying that, do you want to give judges the authority to hold violent offenders without bond? And it left off everything else. Wow. So everyone voted yes, and the rest of it was everybody else gets an OR bond. And there was it took a while, and we're still not totally there yet. I'd agree with what you're saying. We have Democrat DAs, Republican DAs across the state, and Raul Torres in Albuquerque, he's running for Attorney General right now. He's been sort of a vocal advocate against it. Not really against it, because there's not many people that say like their system's perfect, right, and we need to make adjustments to it. It's just that we got rid of it with no way to replace it. What we're starting to see here is more effort being taken for someone that's got multiple cases pending. I can't think of any situation, even if it's a misdemeanor, that there should be anybody that's got more than 2 cases pending. Is some of that just, are you seeing just confusion on this being somewhat of a new thing? Is it the DAs being overloaded, the court being overloaded, kind of a combination of everything with what you're seeing down there?
Well, to be honest, we had a little bit of a perfect storm here, so to speak. Harvey hit in 2017 and flooded our courthouse.
Yeah.
So that was their opportunity to fix some of the issues that were with the courthouse originally. Once that started, then turn around and we had the big sweep of our judges. Every Republican judge in Harris County was voted out in the Beto sweep, because Harris County is turned more blue. And it's more Democratic than Republican here in Harris County now. And so that sweep pushed all the good judges out. And we had a lot of activist judges. We have one judge, Judge Bynum, who is openly claiming to be a socialist. He wears a defund the police shirt on his social media page. And when you have that kind of individual in office that doesn't believe anybody should be in jail, then that's a recipe for disaster. Because without someone holding these people accountable, what are they going to do? They're going to go commit more crimes, because for them, they know, hey, nobody's going to do anything to me. I'm not going to jail. The Harris County courts shut down. A lot of the people shut down for COVID. They were afraid of COVID. So there were at least 6 courts that didn't have trials for almost a year. And then there's others that have been held over for 2 years now without trials. And I know if you don't do your job, you're going to be without a job. They don't have to worry about that. And one of the issues that I look at with the judges, they have complete immunity, where law enforcement, even attorneys, y'all have more of a qualified immunity. Judges have full immunity. They can make whatever decision they want, and nobody can question them, and nobody can hold them accountable. That's part of the issue too. We have to have some kind of check and balance there, even if it's with the bar, to say, look, this is inappropriate. We need to sanction this individual and possibly remove them if they can't do their job. But yet we do not have that right now. So we have to have some checks and balances. We actually, Senate Bill 6 here in Texas tried to help with some of this by saying, look, the judge has to completely review someone's criminal history before they give a bond and sign off on it. And we're thinking, okay, this will help. Because then they have to look at all the cases they've had. Some of these are 4 or 5 cases in their court that they've already seen. You have to turn around and give them another bond because they claim they have to by law. It's just not accurate. They don't have to do that. What they can do is they can say, look, he's committed this many offenses. He's proven that he's not going to act right. We can lock him up.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any pushback from the district attorney's office as far as, for example, here when it happened, it sounds like a similar procedure. If we had an individual that was on an OR bond or any bond, but the way that bail reform worked here was similar to what you guys had. Essentially, it was an OR bond. If they pick up another case, we file a motion in front of the judge, and under the procedures and the case law given to us by the Supreme Court, if we make a showing, with enough evidence that they committed a new crime which violated the conditions of the release, there was case law that said the judge had the authority to hold them without bond pending trial. Are you seeing any pushback from the DA's office as far as trying to, at least on those individuals that have committed more crimes, and they're just not getting the judges to revoke bond or even set a bond?
Well, that's what I talked about earlier a little bit. The DA has filed these motions over 1,500 times on different cases to either keep them locked up or increase their bail to the point that it's going to make it difficult for them to get out. yet the judges ignore it and just, nope, we're going to give them a bond. And a lot of times we had 2 cases here where they violated, the judge brings them back and lowers the bond and lets them out, which just blows me away that they can do that, but they've done that.
Interesting.
And the DA's office knows that this is an issue. They've tried to fight it. Again, she's a Democrat, and she went against our county attorneys and everything, saying, look, we got to do something because I can't effectively do my job. The DA's office is having to triage cases now because the backlog is so bad and just drop. They're dropping probably 70% of the cases in the misdemeanor courts, just having to drop them and dismiss them because they don't have the people to prosecute them, 2, the backlog, and 3, the judges aren't holding anybody accountable about having trials.
Right. And if you got an individual that doesn't show up and then time goes by and by and by, then it's hard to find the officer or a witness has disappeared, and it's just a misdemeanor. So a lot of times I'm familiar with that. It ends up in a dismissal because of the backlog and how long it takes to get the case there and finding witnesses. And, the more time that goes by, the more difficult it becomes to prosecute the case, essentially.
A case now in Harris County, if I was to lock someone up today, let's say for an aggravated robbery case, it could be 4 years before that individual goes to trial. 4 years.
Wow.
And that in itself is a problem.
That is a problem because you're running the speedy trial issues.
Exactly. And they just keep postponing them. So once you start triaging some of these cases and dismissing them, and I know you've probably seen it there too. If a guy walks in, he's arrested for 4 different robberies, they're going to plead 1 and drop the rest, dismiss the rest. That's the only way they're going to catch up with this backlog. We know that. We know we're going to see that same individual again on the streets. An interesting fact is that our state prison right now is 20% lower than it was. We have 20% more room today in Texas prisons than we had 2 years ago because Harris County and Dallas County, Travis County, they're not holding people accountable. They're letting them out on all these bonds. And there's plenty of room for them. Our Harris County jail is so packed with individuals, we ship some to Louisiana to hold over for court.
No kidding. Interesting.
That tells you our courts are not doing their job. They're not working. They're not holding trials. They're not. It's just flat out ridiculous that the citizens of Harris County are now not only paying for our max jail, but to hold prisoners in other places because the courts won't do their job.
Right. I can see the frustration. You're the president of the police union. You have your pulse, your finger on the pulse of the local law enforcement. Has this had an effect on morale, especially considering, everything we've been through in the last few years? Yes, sir, without a doubt. It gets very frustrating that we go out there and arrest these guys, the same individuals, over and over and over. And the sad part is, we know who they are. Once it happens and we know the same MO, we pretty much know who it is. We start building a case on them. We've got them again. And one of the things here in Harris County, our Crime Stoppers has really stepped up and taken a lead role in this and spotlighting all these individuals who are released to go commit more crimes. We had an individual here that was out on felony bond. He killed his girlfriend, shot her 22 times. She was 16 years old. He's a gang member. They let him out on bond. He lives 2 blocks from the family. He would drive by their house and torment them. And I'm not sure I would be a strong enough person if you killed my daughter that I would be able to not take the law in my own hands and make sure that didn't happen again. They revoked his bond because he violated by going by the house. Bring him in, reissue the bond, let him right back out. That's a real problem. The days when law enforcement could look someone in the eye and say, hey, look, I need you to be a good witness. This guy's not getting out of jail. He's going to be locked up until trial. Don't worry about a thing. We can't even say that anymore. Right. And that makes it hard for us to prosecute cases. Yes, that's a good point, because one of the things that I can tell you, being a career prosecutor, is one of the hardest things, and one of the reasons why a lot of prosecutors do the job is because you want to help victims of crimes. And like you mentioned, it's already very difficult to get witnesses on board with the prosecution. And has this changed things, making it even more difficult? And in New Mexico, we have a Victims' Rights Act, and it seems like there has been sort of a tension between the rights for bail reform and then the rights of the victims under the state statute. I don't know if Texas, I'm sure you guys have something similar to that, where victims have rights and they're able to come to court and talk at sentencing. Has there been an effect on that from that aspect?
There has, but it's been kind of a strange dynamic. And I just talked about Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers shine a spotlight on all these judges and what they're not doing. So all of a sudden, some of our what would you say? Some of our Democratic representatives in Harris County started attacking Crime Stoppers, saying, y'all are making this about partisanship. Y'all are making this about being conservative versus Democrat, which is completely untrue. But yet that's what they focus on, just because it's Democratic judges that are letting these guys out. And so you're taking something that shouldn't be partisan and making it that way, just to serve the purposes of saying bail reform works. Sure. Again, I think common sense people could sit down on both sides of the aisle and hash out something that would be, workable for everyone and still hold people accountable. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. We're going to see more victims of crime in Harris County because of bail reform. Instead of fixing the issue, they caused a larger problem. And that's the biggest problem I have with this entire bail reform. If you did it with common sense goals in mind, I think you could get there. The problem is you swing so far one direction, it's very difficult to bring it back. And then when you do, it goes too far the other way. You have to have a collaboration of individuals that can sit down in a room and figure this out in a way that you're not hurting your citizens, yet you're not hurting those that are getting locked up just because they're poor. That was the entire intent of this, and it's completely off the rails.
Yes. So what are you telling your officers as far, with everything that's happened with defund the police and, all the anti-law enforcement rhetoric, and then now you guys got this to deal with, and then the backups from COVID. What's your message to your officers? And I'm sure that maybe recruiting is probably a little bit lower, maybe seeing some folks retiring and getting out of it. Sort of what's your message, kind of in a leadership role, to the officers out there, regardless of where they're at? How do we get through this? Well,
we try to just, first of all, tell them to keep their heads up. Again, morale's low just because of the things going on across the nation. A lot of this, our officers go out there every day and try to do the best with what they have. We have 600, Houston's huge, 677 square miles. We have less than 5,050 police officers right now. And you put that in line with like Chicago. Chicago's got 377 square miles with almost 12,000 officers. They still can't control it. We are doing the best we can with what we have. And our officers, like you said, morale's down. The temperature of the community, thank God we're in Houston, because the citizens of Houston really step up for us and do a great job showing their support. We know that 95% of those out there respect what we do, appreciate what we do. It's that 5% that's really vocal that tries to make it hard on everyone. So we just tell them, look, we got to do what we got to do. We are still going to go out there and protect the citizens with everything we have. Our officers are dedicated to that mission, and they continue to go out there daily and do it. Not saying it's not difficult. We just graduated. We have usually 70 in a class. Our last class graduated 52. The current class in the academy only has 50. So, and we've lost 250 officers this year to retirement. So
your guys are low. They're not getting the numbers in there.
And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And in this day and age, you just have to, push through, we've got the officers that are doing that, and it takes a toll, but we also have to watch after, each other. We've lost 3 this year alone to suicide. And, that's kind of an unspoken demon within the law enforcement community is our suicide rates. And it's very, very difficult when you're dealing with that. And, like anybody else, officers are going to do what they need to do, but then later on, they're going to sit there and think about it and self-medicate with alcohol or, whatever their vice is. And that leads down another road. So it's difficult, but we're getting through it.
That's good. I ask everybody that comes on here, and especially in your position, with all the talk that's been going on about their bail reform and defund the police and all this stuff, where do you fall as far as the training aspect? You have one camp saying, oh, we need more training. And then you got the other camp that's saying defund the police. I started my company, the message was, it's not necessarily more training. Maybe we need to take a look at what kind of training we're getting. And there's the old school attorney that comes in a suit and tie, standing up there with death by PowerPoint, probably not going to accomplish anything. I'm just kind of curious, before we kind of wrap it up, what your take is on kind of the whole training talk. We just saw the president issue an executive order that's talking about that a little bit. We saw a new use of force policy guidelines, Department of Justice. I'm just curious what your take is on that.
I always believe that better training makes a better officer. But we need realistic training. You need hands-on training. Sitting in a classroom watching videos that's not going to help you be a better policeman. You have to have some real life aspect to it that you can train up these officers to know what to do in any given situation. We'll never get it 100% right. This is a human job. It's an emotional job. You're going to have officers that are going to make mistakes. You're going to have officers that are going to, mistake of the mind versus mistake of the heart type issues. You've got to learn to deal with those, and you've got to learn to deal with the community better. Because we both know sometimes it just takes sitting down with someone and having a conversation. The sad part is, everybody talks about neighborhood-oriented policing, how great it is. It is great if you have the time to do that. With the manpower the way it is in most big cities, you don't have time for that. You're running call to call to call. And that's really sad because we as officers want the ability to sit and talk with people, get them to understand our point of view, get them to understand, what it really means to be part of the community that we serve. We try as hard as we can, but at the end of the day, it's a time constraint. It's a money issue. And in Texas, we have over 2,700 law enforcement agencies.
That's incredible. I didn't realize there was that many. I knew there had to be a lot, but that's a lot.
Out of that, 80% of those have less than 20 officers. So when you start thinking about it, how many of them have a budget for training?
Right.
They don't. They come from some other big agency and they write their own little policies and procedures, and there's no real training for that. And you see that when you have a critical incident. And I hate to use Uvalde as a critical incident that you look at, but you have to look at that and think, okay, that was a 12-person agency having to deal with that kind of, they're not used to that. In Houston, something goes down like that, we know what to do. We're prepared for that kind of thing. We train for it. We're ready to go. We have officers ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for that kind of incident. But in a small town, you're not going to have that. And they're not going to have the same training that we have. They just can't. They can try. Put a valiant effort in, but in reality, do they have money for sim rounds? Because, an incident like that, just pretending to be shot at is a lot different than lead coming at you or a projectile actually coming at you. So I'm a firm believer in training, but it has to be the right training.
Absolutely. Yes, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear you say that. That's kind of why I do what I do, because here in New Mexico, it's hard to find anybody that even wants to come out here and do it, let alone get quality training. And the law is so different out here, and it's different in Texas. There's a lot of things different about Texas than anywhere else in the country. And you're right, those small departments out there, when as a practicing attorney, I found it remarkable, the narratives that, the attorney that's doing the lawsuit tries to create. On the defense side, it's it couldn't be further from the truth. They have to create that narrative because they're getting paid to be the attorney. But every single time, what I found in defending the case was, here's an officer that did something stupid because they didn't understand the law. They didn't understand, the gram factors, and now they find themselves in the lawsuit. It's not the narrative that's being created. They were just unprepared because they don't get enough training. So That's always my message, is to encourage all the officers watching this to get any training that your department will offer. Yes. And, if it's not in the budget, find a way to at least get what you can. So we're kind of coming up on time here. I want to give you a chance. I want you to tell everybody, what's your call to action? You've kind of raised some awareness about bail reform in its early stages in Harris County. Where do you want people to go? Anything that you want to tell them as far as kind of a call to action after you've informed them of this?
Well, it doesn't matter where you are in the United States. There's some kind of bail reform going on in your town. The main thing you want to do is be educated on the facts. That's a lot of the issues that we have. People are uneducated on really what it means and what is taking place. You have to pay attention, you have to get educated, and you have to vote. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, vote. Make your voice heard. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way things change. To get out there, get involved, understand the issues, understand the facts, and vote appropriately. And if you're going down a party line to vote, then you're probably doing it wrong. You've got to look at who's the best for the job at the time. I voted Republican, I voted Democrat, because I want the best person that's going to be in there that's doing the job they're supposed to do. And again, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is crime. This is our safety. These are our communities. These are the people that we serve. We have to do what we can to protect them. And the only way we can do that is by holding those accountable who violate our social norms and step out of the bounds of what is rightfully the law. So we need to make sure and hold those individuals accountable. So please get involved, pay attention to your local elections, pay attention to your state elections, your county elections, and understand who you're voting for, what they stand for, and what their plan of action is to keep you safe.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly when I was at the DA's office. Almost everybody in some way, including myself, supports some bail reform because the system's not perfect. We've got things to work on. Right. But what I would find is people coming to me that was a victim of a crime. The people that voted for bail reform support it. They don't understand why, the guy that committed this horrible act against their family member is now getting out. They don't understand because, we just watch the talking points on the news, and you got to educate yourself and figure out how does it really affecting your community. And that's when, like you said, when you're educated, then you can kind of get the change. And I totally agree with you. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. There's a common ground here that'll work. Got to figure out how to get there. Right. So I really appreciate your time coming on here tonight. It's been a while since we had a guest on the Tactical In-Service. You provided a ton of value for everybody, a lot to consider. And for one time, my New Mexico officers that are listening to this wishing they were in Texas are probably thinking, you know what, tonight, actually glad I'm here in New Mexico. Thank you, Officer Griffith. I really appreciate your time. I hope maybe I can get you on here again some other time, maybe give us an update, see how things are going.
Anytime, my friend. And any of your officers that want to come our way, come on down to Houston. We'll take care of you.
All right, I'm not going to tell them that because we don't have enough, and then I'll get in trouble and people will be angry at me. All right, sir, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I always say to the officers out there, remember every battle's won before it's fought. Stay safe. See you in the next episode, guys.